and be your happy time. 'Cause everyone's gonna know one day, so don't keep it to yourself, pass it on. Take the time to come to me. Let me give you everything you're gonna need. Tell the world I'm alive, and my love for them's the reason that I die.
The Profile. You're listening to Premier Christian Radio.
Where faith comes to life.
Hello and welcome to The Profile here on Premier Christian Radio. I'm Sam Hales, editor of Premier Christianity magazine. That is the publication that sponsors this show and makes it all possible. We're printing news, features, reviews, and so much more every single month, and we would love for you to check it out. If you enjoy these interviews on The Profile, you're sure to love Premier Christianity magazine. Get yourself a free copy now at premierchristianity.com/free sample. All you have to do is give us your details, give us your address, and we will pop the latest issue in the post to you, completely free of charge and no strings attached. That's premierchristianity.com/free sample. Now, a moment ago, you heard some music, and that music was Bryn Haworth, the legendary guitarist, worship leader, singer, songwriter, and the track that you heard played was Pass It On, one of his biggest hits. And the interview this afternoon you're going to hear was with Premier's very own Simon Tuck, and Simon's delved into Bryn's back catalogue, delved into his faith, his life, his career, and so much more. If you haven't heard of Bryn Haworth before, he's a British Christian singer-songwriter, guitarist, and pioneer of Jesus music in mainstream rock. He was born in Lancashire. He's released over 20 albums ever since the 1970s, and he's still going now. Continues to tour in the UK, also has a prison ministry, which you'll hear him talk a little bit about as well. He's famous most of all for his guitar playing, especially slide guitar, and you'll hear him talk about that in the interview as well. So without any further ado, let me pass over to Simon Tuck for The Profile this afternoon with Bryn Haworth.
You're listening to Premier Radio. It's me, Simon, on The Profile Show, and I'm talking with Bryn Haworth. Can I start this profile by reading out a quote from John Ingham for Sounds music paper? And you might have to explain what that is to some people who don't know what that is. If we are to have a God rock, then let it be Bryn. He thinks of the music foremost. You owe yourself a listen.
Well, Sounds was a music paper. There was lots of music papers like Melody Maker back in the 60s, and he was a journalist for that period. And I think the thing is that because my wife and I became followers of Jesus in '73, it was quite a thing in a way that for an electric guitar player to become a Christian in those days, and it wasn't really heard of in England. And so they were quite intrigued, the journalists, when they got my albums. My first solo album was in it came out 74, I think. And Let the Days Go By. And then I had an album called Sunny Side of the Street. And they called me, my review for Sunny Side of the Street was Happy Haworth. And they thought the solution for Happy Haworth was to take him to an Indian restaurant, give him the hottest vindaloo curry there was, and then stand him out in the rain afterwards, and that will sort him out. But basically, we have to admit that the music is good, and so I think that was very. I like that interview. I thought it was a great report to give to me about me.
Yeah, how lovely. I mean, it's lovely when people reflect back onto your music and give you some, maybe not critique, yes, but actually there's always some favourable things in there somewhere along the line. Now, you weren't a Christian when you were younger. That was quite late on in life then, with it being 1973?
Yes, I was brought up in Lancashire in a place called Darwin, between Blackburn and Bolton, which is in the news at the moment, Blackburn and Darwin. And my parents, basically, it was that generation that you were made to go to church, but they didn't go with you, kind of thing. They just thought it was a good thing. But I couldn't see anything in it at all. And so I was really glad to not go when I didn't have to go. And so I don't think anything really stuck, as it were. And I really just wanted to make music. I got a guitar when I was 11 and pestered my parents for one. And then they sent me to lessons for a year, classical guitar lessons, which were fantastic because I realized that the instrument could do so much more than I thought it could. And so I had a good year of classical guitar lessons. And then really the rest of the time in the 60s, I was in bands. From a very early age, I would go be in working men's clubs in various bands playing. I was underage, but it didn't seem to matter much then. But and then I got my first job when I left school. I was working in a paper mill, but basically I couldn't get up in the morning because I'd been up late at night playing in bands, and so I realized that something had to give, and my father and I weren't getting on. So basically, I left home and went to live in London when I was 17, 18, and ended up in Victoria bus station, sleeping there at night, and then during the day looking for a job in a band. And in those days, in Tottenham Court Road, Denmark Street, they had music shops with ads saying wanted lead guitar player, vocalist. So I would queue up with all the other guitar players, do my audition, and just hang around in the coffee bar. And eventually, I got a phone call saying, "Would you like to join the band?" And I got to sleep on their floor. They had a basement flat, and so I had somewhere to live. and then from then on, I've just been playing professionally guitar in various bands and doing sessions from that point. And I got to go to, I had a great time in the 60s in London, playing in, we had a residency in a band in a place called the Speakeasy, Margaret Street, where all the Beatles and Hendrix and Clapton used to come in. I got to jam with people like Jimi Hendrix, and then I wanted to go to America, so I left in '69. I went to America, lived there in California, joined bands there, and had a great time playing. Wolfgang was a band managed by someone who used to manage the Fillmore West and Fillmore East, Bill Graham, and he managed us. And so it was all really, really happening. And then out of the blue, I had a dream. And it was a really, really long dream, very powerful dream. And all these painful memories surfaced, a lot of hurt and fear and anger. And at the end of each scene in this dream, a voice would say, "Did you understand this?" And I would go, "Yes or no," and it would move on to another one. And when I woke up the next day, it was about midday, 12 o'clock, and I was just completely shattered by this dream. And all that I knew is that I had to go back to England and get right with my dad, my father. And it was interesting because I didn't like him, he didn't like me. I hadn't thought about him, spoken to him for years. But that thought was so strong that I bought a ticket back to England that same week and left the band, told the guys, "I have to do this," which is remarkable. You know, I mean, from a dream, you think for a dream to change your direction in life so much, but it's that strong, that powerful. Went back to England with Sally, who is my wife now, and we ended up in Wales, living there for. In those days, if you wanted to write, you go to the country and chill out, and that's what we did. We went to North Wales and got a cottage, and then what happened then was, it's like this time now, this lockdown time, where you're suddenly pulled out of your normal existence. Your job has stopped, and you're not in your normal daily routine, and you've got all this time on your hands, and you start thinking about your life. You start looking at your habits, and you're thinking, for me, it was like, why do I have to drink a bottle of wine a day? why do I drink so much, do so much dope every day? You know, why am I so angry and fearful? Why am I so driven and so insecure? You know, and I would never have thought about these things before when I was busy with my job in California. But now I'd been set apart and I had time to look at it. And the other questions are, who am I? And what am I doing here? What's my purpose? And it was very, very scary in a way because I didn't have any answers. But then I got to the question, is there a God? And I thought, well, if there is a God, then he must want to communicate. I can't imagine a God creating everything and then just standing back and watching it all go by. So I thought, well, the way to communicate would be to shout. And so I went on long walks and shouting, God, are you there? If you are, you've got to let me know. And sheep would look at me very strangely. But I thought, no, I want to know. And my wife, Sally, she was chanting cross-legged, and I couldn't do that. But she was seeking God in her way. And what happened was we suddenly thought, well, if God is there, then this is a very scary thing. This is not healthy because he probably doesn't like people who play electric guitar, loud electric guitar, eat meat, drink, smoke dope. We got to change our lives to make ourselves acceptable to God. And so we gave up drugs, we gave up drink, we became vegetarians, and then that wasn't pure enough. We became fruitarians. and you know, but we felt better in ourselves, but we still didn't know God, so we went back to smoking and drinking. Anyway, cut a long story short, 3 years later, we go for a drive and we see this circus tent in this field in East Sussex, and we went, oh, look, a circus. And I'd just drawn, I just started painting. The first thing I ever painted that week, the week of starting, was a red and white striped tent. And we will go for a drive, and that week, and there's this red and white striped tent in the corner of the field. I thought, it's just like what I've painted. And so we went in, and we sat at the back so we could make a quick escape if we didn't like it. And turned out it was a gospel meeting, not a circus. And I couldn't understand anything to do with what the preacher was saying. His language was alien to me. I couldn't understand the words, redeemed and salvation and things like that. But there was this banner over the front of the stage saying, Jesus, some of the words of Jesus, I am the way, the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And I thought, well, you know, I've tried my way for 26 years and my way isn't working. God, I think if God is ever going to be real to me, then I'm going to have to take a step of faith tonight. And so that's what I did. And you had to go to the front to be prayed for. And I remember just going to the front, being prayed for, and then going out of that tent and looking up at the sky. And I thought, I'm home. I belong. And that God was real. And it was just amazing. You know, I tried to adjust my life before and make myself acceptable, and that hadn't worked. I tried to be good. That didn't work. But this simple 4-line prayer, and I walked out of that tent and I knew that God was real. And this is what they call, that Jesus called being born of the Spirit, born again. That you're a spirit, you live in a body, and when you welcome him into your life, your spirit comes alive to him. He comes and makes his home by his spirit. In your life, you become alive to God. God becomes real to you. And it's a genuine, very real experience, quite radical.
Was that true for your wife as well at the same time? Or because obviously you've both been searching at the same time, but had that night been true for both of you or just for yourself?
Both of us, same night.
Wow.
And so, which was really a blessing, because if one of us had gone and the other, I mean, I had to be dragged in a way. She was the one who was really ready to go, and she said, come on, are you coming to the front? And I was holding onto her hand, holding onto the chair, and I couldn't let go of either. And so my wife, me, and the chair came to the front that night. And because I was just, you know, as a man, your pride is involved. You think, you know, I'm a legend in my own mind kind of thing. You know, I've just got my new album coming out. My solo career is starting. This isn't cool. But I just knew I had to do it. I knew that there was life here, and that I didn't have that. And so that was really the beginning of this whole journey of finding out who God really is, and rather than how I imagined him to be. And it's been an ongoing experience.
Well, let's talk about some faith in the future in just a moment, but I want to go back just to a couple of things that you just said there. So that relationship with your parents, that you came back to England, and did you resolve the issue with your father? I mean, was your relationship with your mother just as much always been better than just your dad, or was it just a clash of who you were? Or
Well, my parents divorced when I was 13, so my mother went off with another man, so that was the end of the family, really. And but I did have a better relationship with her than with my father. My father was quite damaged from the Second World War, that mentally he didn't talk very much, and wasn't able to communicate. And, you understand those things in hindsight, but at the time he's just your dad and he just doesn't talk, But when we came back to Wales, when I came back from California, I landed at Heathrow. I drove straight up to Darwin, where my dad was living, knocked on the door, and he said, "What do you want?" And that was the first, I'd come back with all these kind of like hopes. I've got to get right with my dad. And he said, "What do you want?" And so I said, "Well, why don't we just go to the pub? Let's sit down and have a drink." And so we went to the pub, and it was really awkward. I had my pint, he had his pint, and we just didn't talk. And I thought, what have I come back for? I've left a really good career here, playing in America. The band was great. We were doing well. I've left this to come and get right with you, and you don't even want to know. And so it really freaked me out, because I didn't think it would work out like that. But I tell you, after I became a believer, something happened in my heart, and I started to get feelings of love for my dad. And I started to call him up on the phone, and we'd have very stilted conversations. And then I'd visit, if I was up there in the north, and just visit him. It was still quite difficult. But really what happened over those years, while he was still alive, he died a few years ago, our relationship got really much better. And you think, well, that's all God, and you think that I didn't realize that God was called Father, and that those words, go back to England and get right with your father, I think was a really starting point for me, from God saying, go back to you and get right with your dad, and then things will start to shift in your own life, and then get right with your father too. And that happened to your Heavenly Father. So I'm really grateful to God for the stirrings and the changing of feelings of indifference, even really. I didn't really care for him, or I didn't think about him, to loving him. So by the time he died, I loved him, and we had a relationship. It was never great, easy relationship, but that's just, the characters that we are. And but God changed my heart, and I think it's that scripture that he will turn the hearts of the children to the fathers, the hearts of the fathers to the children. Is it Malachi? And that's a true thing that happened to me. He turned my heart towards my father, and I think my father's heart was turned to me too.
Yeah, thank you, Bryn. That's really, really, really lovely. You've become a Christian then at 73. Who are those Christian then musical influences around you then, who are going to help you discover that actually your own music could become Christian music without having to change your style or your ideas?
Well, again, I was really blessed that the pastor of our first church was a man called Eddie Pearce, and it was a small Baptist church, Welcome. It's called the Welcome in Heathfield, and it was he was an ex-Baptist minister, I think, but it was it was an evangelical church. But Eddie took a real interest in us. I don't think he'd ever met anybody like us before, and but it was great counseling for us. He gave us a lot of time, a lot of pastoral wisdom, and he took me to see Cliff Richard in Eastbourne. Now I presumed that Eddie knew Cliff, but Eddie was such an interesting character. He I found out after I didn't actually know Cliff, but he just kind of waltzed into the dressing room with me and so and said, "Hi, Cliff," and Cliff went, "Hi," as he was, and I said, "This is Bryn Haworth. He's just become a Christian. He plays electric guitar," and so I got on with Cliff quite well, and then the other influence, real big help, was Garth Hewitt. Garth Hewitt, he was on the same bill that night in Eastbourne. And he opened up, with his big hairy chest and his blue denim shirt up, and was smashing his guitar and singing quite boldly, And I loved Garth straight away. And Garth, he took us under his wing in the sense that he made sure that we were able to be ourselves and to keep on making the music that you make, but let God guide you in what you sing about, as it were. And so at that time, I'd had my first album out, and the second album was Sunny Side of the Street, and I got more gospel-oriented lyrics. Like on that first album, there was just one song. There was a searching song. This one, I had songs like Good Job and really full-on gospel songs. And he encouraged me and protected me, as it were, to be yourself, and just to keep following Jesus. And so those two really.
Yeah. Because you'd come from a musical background, both in the UK, but also in America. And you got this job in London, you're working down the Speakeasy, doing bits and pieces. You have to be influenced by the music around you at that time as well. Who were those early influences that you would have bought vinyl from?
Well, there was all the guitar players basically, but the first real influence for me as a guitar player was a guy called Steve Cropper. He was in a band called Booker T and the MGs, the Green Onions,
Yes, I know it. Yeah. He was in the Blues Brothers movie as well.
He was. Steve Cropper for me was it. Yeah, I loved that sound, and I wanted to be a psychedelic version of Steve Cropper. This was the 60s, So we were starting to experiment more with distortion and playing different styles. And then Jimi Hendrix came along. And, when you see Jimi Hendrix, when he first came to London, I saw him play. And you think, when you experience him playing, right, like 3 feet away from you and hearing that, you go, wow, this is something. Eric Clapton, all the usual suspects, that were really just breaking through into a new kind of guitar playing style, because up to that point it had been quite clean and restricted, but these guys were getting very free in their playing and their sound, and it was all opening up. Everything that you hear now is just rooted in those early 60s, but the guys like Hendrix and Clapton, they would learn from Freddie King and B.B. King, who had tendency to have a cleaner sound, but they took it, just played louder. And so those are the guys for me. But when I went to America, I was exposed to more and more guitar players, Santana, all these guys. But Peter Green was out there too, the Fleetwood Mac. But I think it's all the usual suspects. But then I heard a guy called Ry Cooder, who plays slide, and his first album was really influential for me. I thought, well, that's good, because I started out playing slide when I left Darwin, as it were, because I didn't know how to bend strings, because guitars in those days came with very thick, heavy strings, and you couldn't really bend the notes. And so I read an article about slide guitar, bottleneck guitar, and how you use a piece of glass or a washer or a piece of metal on your finger. And so when I came down to London, that's how I play guitar. I played slide. And then I saw everybody had light gauge strings, and so I chucked it away. So when I heard Ry Cooder again, I thought, no, slide. I remember that. It's a beautiful thing to do, and you can make it very tuneful and melodic. And it opened up a whole area for me again. And I was in a 2-guitar band, and I thought, well, Celia's doing the same thing, so I'll play slide, and you can play regular guitar. And so that's how I got back into playing slide.
So you've rooted yourself now. You've got these albums. You've met Cliff Richard. You're in the 80s. What would you say a memorable moment from the 80s was for you? I'd like to say when I became a Christian in 87, you were a big influence in my life, because I loved your material, because it wasn't the normal run-of-the-mill Christian worshipy thing. It was actually a little bit more, it was a bit more where I was at, because I was into Quo, I was into kind of like AC/DC, I was into Led Zepp. I had grown in that era of like Motorhead and the Beatles, and I needed someone to represent that kind of music in the Christian world as well. And so I want to say thank you, first of all. But the 80s was like a sort of a sparse time, really, of Christian artists that were doing anything too different.
I was thrilled. I mean, I'd just come out of a contract in '79 with A&M. I'd done 2 albums for them, Grand Arrival and Keep the Ball Rolling. And it got sticky with A&M because they realized that, you know, songs like Grand Arrival, talking about the Second Coming, wasn't incredibly commercial. And I realized that it wasn't great business for them. And I thought, if I want to carry on singing stuff that I want to sing, I'm going to have to go on another label. And fortunately, in '80, Chapel Lane started a new Christian label with Rob Andrews, and Rob had a studio in Herefordshire, and I got signed to Chapel Lane, and it was great because you had Norman Barrett there, you had who else was there? Sheila Walsh came eventually, Mark, what's he called? Can't remember. But it was a good little stable, as it were, and for the first time I was able to do an album that I was able to be myself completely on, and that was The Gap. At that time, 1980, 81, and we did The Gap, and I did it with Eric Clapton's band, because a couple of them had got saved. You know, I'd been working with them before, and God had moved in their lives, and they got saved. And so, and I had Chris Stainton too on keyboards, and Bruce Rowland, great musicians, and we did that album, The Gap, and then we did, on the back of that, we did my first worship album in 1984 called Wings of the Morning, and because I really started realized how much I loved to sing to God, and I would go up in my room and sing. At that time, you suddenly started to have songs like "I Love You, Lord," and "I Lift My Voice," with lyrics. Basically, it was Christian worship songs that were actually telling God that you loved Him. Now that was unheard of. It was all about God. The lyric was about Him, and majesty and everything, but there was nothing intimate, nothing personal. And I think it was the time when Maranatha music was coming out, and John Wimber was involved in that, I know. But I suddenly got hold of these songs, and I could sing. I could tell God I loved Him, and I got really loved that. And then I wanted to do a worship album myself, just to worship. And we did Wings in the Morning, and then Pass It On. And that was another album with Chapel Lane. And then I did Mountain Mover and Blue and Gold. So 80s were actually a really good creative period for me. And there was lots of work around, lots of concerts as well. And so it was a great time.
Do you want to stay informed on the best of what's happening in the UK church today? Premier Christianity magazine is for you. The UK's leading Christian magazine is published every month and features interviews with Christian leaders, in-depth reporting, reviews, columnists, and loads more. And best of all, you can try it for free. Head to our website now to request the latest edition, worth £5.95, completely free of charge.
Visit premierchristianity.com/free sample.
How did you, with your wife, continue faith in these times? Were you missing America? Had you heard God specifically say something to you during that period of time? Had you said, no, I'm not going back now, I'm just going to stay with the UK? This is where God was? Or did you ever have a moment where you go, God, why aren't you sending me back? Or why aren't we going back to what we first started with?
Well, I think at one point we did try to go back, and it just didn't happen. With the whole visa thing, and we couldn't make it happen. But at the same time, we were going to a church in Hounslow called Holy Trinity Hounslow, and the vicar there, John Barter, was magnificent. He was just a wonderful, wonderful man. Unfortunately, he's not with us anymore, but he was charismatic, filled with the Spirit, and allowed so much freedom. And I remember I went back to America just as a visit, just to see some friends. And the owner of a music shop in Westwood in Los Angeles was called Fred Walecki, and he'd become a Christian. And I knew him well because he used to buy stuff from the shop all the time. And he knew that I'd become a Christian. And so he said, well, I'll take you to my church. And so we went to, it was pre-Vineyard. It was called, Ken Gullickson ran it. And I heard people singing these wonderful worship songs, you know. And I learned as many as I could because I knew that something was happening in the midst of these people that I'd never experienced, the presence of God. And I was aware that these songs were helpful in this whole thing of meeting with God and him drawing us into a closer and more intimate relationship with him. And then, so I learned them in the car going back to the airport. Fred was singing to me, I was taping them. And I took them back to Holy Trinity Hounslow and started to play them and introduce them into the church there, into small house groups. And the same thing happened. The presence of God just felt, you know, you'd be singing like, isn't he beautiful? Beautiful, oh, isn't he? Which is a song I didn't like at the time, but I didn't understand. I didn't know God in that way, and but I could see the presence of God was on people. There was people moved to tears as well. There's a deeper thing going on through these songs. These songs were helping people to engage with God in a way that they hadn't done previously. And John was wonderful. He would encourage more and more worship, and we had worship meetings in our house. For any denomination could come. We had open house and did worship meetings just to learn how to worship and how to go more deeper in this time. So the whole thing of going back to America kind of fell by the wayside, really, because we were really moving forward at that time.
So you on that journey with God throughout, and just him just saying, look, America's just been put on hold. Has there been a moment over the last decades or so, though, when there's been tough moments with God? Has there been a moment where perhaps you've gone, because you're telling me about like God is at work and God is moving, but that's not life like that all the time, is it?
No. I mean, there's obviously the trials and things that you go through in life, you know, like trying to buy a house or trying to sell a house or relationships that happen. But I think in these times I think it's just learning to trust God, because you've experienced that he's, you know, right from the beginning when we first became Christians in 1974, I had to test in a way the word of God, whether did you really mean that you would provide for us? You know, because we don't have, I'm a musician, I have no work, I have no money. I mean, one of the things is that I told the record company, Sunny Side of the Street, Island Records, I said, I'm going to become a missionary. And so I was waiting for my call to go to Africa, because I thought that's what you should do. Mm-hmm. And they said, okay, right, well, we're not putting your record out then. And so what happened was we got poorer and poorer. We didn't have any money at all. And I thought, no, I've got to stay true to this call of God to go to Africa and be a missionary. And we realized that we needed money, and I didn't know how to do that. And suddenly, we didn't tell anybody in the church that we needed money at all, but suddenly, it was amazing that how God provided. Suddenly, we didn't lock our cars in those days, and opened up the car door one, there was an envelope in the car with money in there. And then there was one time that I wanted to buy, it was Sally's birthday, and I wanted to buy her a meal. I wanted to buy her a lobster. And I kept reading the scripture and saying, Lord, it says that you provide all I need. And I thought, I know this isn't a need, but I just love Sally and I would love to give her something nice. And then I kept waiting for money coming through the door or something, but nothing happened. On the day of her birthday, her mother called up and said, are you coming up to the house? I've got some lobster for you. So I thought, so I'm learning right from the first year that you can trust God. you can trust him. You don't have to worry. You can trust him. Just pray, tell him your needs, and all these, and obviously not everything comes, but I think in life, I mean, obviously, friends and families dying and losing people is always a hard experience, but generally, I think we had a good relationship. Sally and I had a good relationship, and we also had a good relationship with the Word of God. Yeah. We were able to keep trusting him.
Music has obviously had a huge influence, and people around you have had a huge influence on you. But I imagine you've also had people get in contact with you, Bryn, and say, look, your music has had an influence on my life, and this is the story that I want to tell you. Do you have a story that you could share with us?
What people saying that?
Yeah, saying about your music, saying how, you know what, Bryn, your music has had a big influence on my life, and this is the story behind it. Or maybe somebody was about to do something and they heard your music and their life changed, or they moved on, or.
Well, yeah, I don't tend to really focus on that at all. Really, I just kind of, I'm very thankful, I'm very grateful, but I just really feel that I'm called. I just feel is to get on with what you do.
Okay.
And don't look at other people, peers or whatever. Just get on with what you do. Run your own race. Keep close to God. Keep doing what you feel God is telling you to do with that. And if anything good comes from it, then fantastic. That's great. But I mean, I'm very pleased because we work in prisons. We've been working in prisons for over 30 years now. And so when an inmate says to me, that song really opened me up like a can opener kind of thing. It's not like one of these nice modern ones, but like a can opener that you rip round. And it opened him up and got him thinking about God and started to make his life differently and more receptive to God. I think if people are able to start this dialogue and this conversation with the Lord through songs, if that starts them off and gets them going and encourages them, that's wonderful. It's a wonderful thing. But
so sorry.
Yeah, go on.
Well, I was going to say, well, where did prison ministry come from? Is it just something that came out of the blue, or did God specifically say to you, or did one day you just got invited to a prison to play, or?
No, it was, again, this was the 80s, which was a very, again, creative time. But I was finding that as busy as I was, and I loved leading worship. I loved doing, because by that time we just started to do New Wine in 89, conferences, like that, and leading worship for big groups of people. But as much as I loved this, I found that I was getting bored. There was something in me that I was losing my love for God. And I don't know how that happened. It's just because I was doing all the right things, ministry, and I loved what I was doing, but I was drifting. And I felt my heart was getting very hard. And I wrote a song about it in 89. It's called Give Me Your Heart, which is a very honest song, and explains where I was at. But at the same time, I was reading the Bible, reading the Gospels, and I came across Matthew 25, the sheep parable, the sheep and the goats, and verse 36, I was in prison and you visited me. And I loved that. And I went, I thought, I'd love to go into prison. Because I was just looking at the subject of ministry to Jesus, and I thought, is this the way to minister to Jesus, to be, even though I love what I'm doing, is this a good way to do it? And my heart leapt every time I read that. But then I talked myself out of it. I said, well, what would you do? You're just a musician. You don't know anybody in prison. You don't know how to get in prison. And I talked myself out of it and forget about it. But then every time I read the scripture over a period of 3 years, my heart leapt. And I thought, I would love to do that. And what happened was we joined the Vineyard Church in Southwest London Vineyard, the first vineyard in England. And the pastor, it was only like just bigger than a house group, the church at that time. And the pastor took me on as a part-time worship leader to get the worship up and running, buy equipment. and also start a prison ministry. Now it's just the weirdest thing. 89, 90, nobody was doing prison ministry, but he said, I want you to start a prison ministry. I thought, right, okay. I was cornered, and so I had to do it. And so I got in my office and I said, I called up all the chaplains in the prisons in London and said, my name's Bryn Haworth, can I come in? And can we come in? And they all said no, except for one, David Cairns, who was a church army chaplain in Wandsworth. They said, yeah, come along, I'll show you what happens on a Wednesday chaplaincy meeting. So we went in, saw what happened for the hour meeting, and then as we were coming out, and he was rattling keys and opening doors, he turned around and he looked at me in the eyes and he said, right, you do it next week. And I went, okay. And so I went back to the church and said that we need a group of people who will come with me in prison. And so I gathered a group of about 5 girls and men and women, and trembling individuals. And we went in, and I did the next week I did a couple of worship songs, I did some testimony songs, and after half an hour I'd run out of stuff to do. And I said to one of the girls in the group, I said, what should we do? And she went, does anybody here need prayer? And all the hands shot up. All the guys in the room shot their hands up. And so for the next half hour, we were just praying for one another. And that's basically what we do now still. We've been doing for 30 years, and that's how it started. It wasn't something that I was seeking, but I would say that I feel called to do it. I'm just finishing off a new CD for prison, and this will be the third that we give away free in prisons. And it's just made for them in mind, and it's called Peace and Understanding. And on this particular album, I've got a song that's co-written with an inmate, which is the first for me. And he had become a new believer, and I knew him quite well, and he was struggling in his walk with God. And he wrote this poem, and he just handed me this piece of paper with this poem on it. I looked at it and I thought, I can do something with this. I can put music to it. And so I've put music to it, and we've recorded it on this CD. And I hope that it's going to be a real influence and a help to get more creativity out of inmates, that they can do more creative things and be an encouragement to them. The song is called Answer My Prayer. So when we get it, I could send it to you if you'd like to hear it.
Wow, that is, I love the way sometimes you're thrust into doing something and it just suddenly becomes the thing that actually, you're meant to be involved in as well. But you have a love of conservation as well. You wrote a song about trees about over a year ago now.
Yeah.
What is the passion behind that?
Well, what happened was we have a small area in the back here where we live, historic woodland, and it's about 200, 300 years old. So it's the last vestige of a wood that used to stretch miles up here in Epsom. And we heard that these builders had bought one of the houses on the street with the aim to knock it down and build drive-through and build 11 new city-style houses in these gardens and knock all these trees down. And we didn't know about it, except the next door neighbor to this house told us, and she was very upset. She was in tears. And so basically we just got swept into the battle to save basically the trees, because they're magnificent Austrian pines, beech trees. They're really huge, 100-foot tall, beautiful things, and they were just going to wipe them out. And we thought, no, we've got to fight this. But we found that most people we became default leaders of a campaign really on our street, and we found most people were so apathetic about it. So, oh well, the government, they just get their way in the end. What's the point? And I thought, no, you can't let people roll over. You've got to fight. And so we had meetings in our house and got the whole, we've been here for 20 years and we hardly knew any of the neighbors after 20 years. It's that kind of very English, you just shut the door and you go in. Nobody really talks except about the weather. And but now we know everybody in the street. We've got a WhatsApp group. We've got all sorts of things. So because of this campaign for the trees, because now we're in COVID, we've got this network and community on our street already going, and we're able to look after each other, and the elderly provide food for and shop and still. And so it worked out really well. But we got the neighbors rally. We did letters to those who don't have the internet here. We put letters through the door and say, this is happening. You have a vote. You have a chance to object. Online if you can. We'll do it for you. If you can't do it, if you're too elderly and haven't got a computer. And so we got about 130 people, 130 objections, and the council turned it down the first time, which was brilliant. And then it went to Bristol, and then Bristol has turned it down too. So it's been good. And I got a song in the midst of it. I was so upset. I was in tears, and I came down and sat down at my desk, had a guitar there, and I got this song, Enough is Enough, in about 20 minutes, the whole thing. And I thought, maybe we can use this in part of the campaign and get it on the radio and things. And so I recorded it quickly, straight away. And I had a friend who worked for the BBC and did videos for National Geographic, and he loved the song, and he said, I'd love to do a video. And we did it really quickly and got it out. And I think it helped. We got a few plays, but it is hard to get these environmental things on TV, because I think it's boring for people. I think it's a good thing, but they want something a bit more exciting. But the earth, the music of the trees being silenced and the earth being ravaged isn't enough of a thrill for people, I don't think. But anyway, I did the song, we got it going, and it's turned out good. And the birds are still singing in the trees for now, but who knows if and when the developers maybe return. But at this time, we're free of it, and I'm glad that it was just something we had to do. We felt called to do it and to become leaders of it.
So it's about listening to God throughout the whole of your life, isn't it? It's you heard in stages, and right now in the last 2 years or so, you're hearing God about something new around you, as well as still being interested in that kind of music side of this as well. Bryn, you and I are on a car journey, and you've got your Spotify app or your music app open or whatever. Who should we be listening to as we drive down the motorway?
Well, I tell you what, we've been doing a lot of jigsaws in this lockdown period, and it's a perfect time to put on CDs. If you've got a CD collection, do a jigsaw, 1,000-piece jigsaw, put some music on. You go through your whole collection really quickly. But I'm listening to, there's a Paul Simon album, which is, I really like it. It's from 2018. It's called In the Blue Light. And it's it's been missed by people, but it's some of his older songs that he's redone in a different way, and it's a great album. That album, I love Bob Dylan's new album. I think that's a great album too. You always is quite deep with him, makes you think. For general listening, I just brought an old Leon Russell called Hank. Hank is back. Hank Wilson's back, and it's all the country stuff. And I was listening to, again, another one. I was listening to Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? That from that film, the music from that film. So wow! And I love Boz Scaggs. Boz Scaggs is a great. If you want to just settle in a good mood, and easy bluesy type, but really well, great guitar playing and singing. Boz Scaggs always gets it for me. So it's quite a mixture.
And I look over to you as I'm driving you, and we're listening to these CDs, which you made a nice compilation album. Thank you. What are the snacks you bring in?
Snacks. I actually like. I actually like these cereal bars. There's some really nice ones that are really squidgy, not crunchy, and they're quite soft. They have blueberry or banana kind of thing.
Yeah. And
they're quite easy and non-messy, because these cereal bars in the car are just such a pain. You go everywhere.
So look, Bryn, you're in the top 50. So it's a cover of the song What a Friend We Have in Jesus. Tell me about the passion behind the song, and maybe a story.
Well, What a Friend We Have in Jesus is a very popular song in prisons. When I lead worship in prison, you need songs that engage people quickly. And that song has a resonance. If there's a black population there, a lot of the black guys have been in church. They've got a church connection, and so they know that song. I do it in a reggae style if I do it in a church situation, in a prison situation. But it's a powerful song. It connects quickly and connects them quickly to God. It's like I stand amazed in the presence. You know, that's another one. How marvelous! It's something that draws people into worship quickly, and What a Friend does that too. And I've always loved it, but it's turned up in a couple of different situations for me. I was doing a gig in Norwich in the cathedral, and it wasn't in the main cathedral, it was in a back room, and I was doing a sound check, and the caretaker there was sweeping up around me while I was doing my sound check. And I started singing What a Friend We Had in Jesus, and he stopped. He looked up and didn't say anything, carried on sweeping. But after the concert, he said, that song woke me up. That came from my childhood. I remember that song, and What a Friend We Have in Jesus. And it opened up the whole conversation with him. And we were able to lead him to the Lord that night. And that was just through the song. It woke him up. And another story is, I've done a lot of work with a guy called Jerry Rafferty, who's a musician. He's he died nearly 10 years ago, but he did Stuck in the Middle with You and Baker Street. Baker Street was the big one. And every once in a while, as a professional musician, you get treats. And working with him was a treat, both on a musical level and also the fact that he liked to go to exotic locations to record. So one summer he took us to Barbados to have a week in Barbados at Eddie Grant's studio. But the thing is, I might as well have been in Clapham for as much of Barbados that I saw, because the work schedule was really heavy. You start at lunchtime and you go right through to 3 or 4 in the morning, and it just wouldn't stop. Wow. But we did have moments of playtime in the studio, which were where you get this opportunity to play past the guitar. Now Jerry he loved this game, and he'd sing a song on acoustic, and then he'd pass it to the next person. You have to sing the song, which is quite intimidating when you think, when you hear his voice and you hear the songs that he sings, and then he said, "Okay, Bryn, here's the guitar. Now you sing me a song." And I remember that one time my mind went completely blank, and the only thing that came out was the old hymn, "What a Friend We Have in Jesus." And I started playing "What a Friend," and there was a lot of dope smoking going on in those days. And not with me, but the place was filled with dope, and I was going, "What a friend we have in Jesus." And I was playing it like you'll hear it now, but I was playing it like that. And I've experienced this many times now. The presence of God filled that room, just cleaned the room of all the dope smoke, and filled the room with His presence, and everyone went quiet. And when I finished, everybody in that room said, "Yeah, man, that's what I believe too." And from the Rastaman engineer with dreadlocks down to his waist, and to Jerry, they were going, "Yeah, man, that's what we believe too. That's what we believe too." It was remarkable. It was really a beautiful moment. And I was thinking that song does strike a resonance in just this whole thing of, we belong. We belong to God. First and foremost, we belong to God. Then we believe, and then we change it, and our behavior changes. But first of all, He's saying, "Come home. You belong. This is who you are. You have a friend who is for you, not against you." And so,
Bryn, would you like to introduce the song for us?
This is the song, my arrangement of "What a Friend We Have in Jesus."
What a friend we have in Jesus, all our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. Oh, what peace we often forfeit. Oh, what needless pain we bear. All because we do not carry everything to God in prayer.
Well, we're just going to fade that beautiful song there because we don't want to fall foul of any copyright issues, do we? My thanks to Simon Tuck and, of course, to Bryn Haworth as well for that fascinating interview. And here on the Profile Podcast, as much as it pains us to fade that music, we would encourage you to check out Bryn's music and ministry. Perhaps you want to get hold of that song or one of his albums. It's all available at brynhaworth.com. That's brynhaworth.com, so why not do that? And a final reminder as well, you can get yourself a free copy of Premier Christianity magazine. That's our website, premierchristianity.com. We'll see you same time, same place next week right here on the Profile Podcast. There's one last thing you could do that would really help us out. If you did enjoy that interview or the other interviews that we've been doing, we'd really appreciate it if you give us a rating and a review wherever you found this podcast. It helps other people to discover the show and it means a lot to us. So why not take the time to do that now? A rating and a review wherever you found this podcast. All right, thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time. God bless.